It isn't unusual for Americans, for instance, to eat up to 10, 12 times per day. Take yeast cells, for instance. If you deprive them of food, you don't give them that much food, they will live much longer.
Nutritional physiologist Inge Lindseth.
What Valter Longo has done is to conceive kind of a type of fast. It's not just eating just a little bit more than nothing, but actually quite a lot more, about 1/3 of what you usually eat. Comparison study where you compare water fasting to fasting mimicking diet. And it turned out that actually the fasting mimicking diet performed better. The fasting period can do something about how your body operates as a whole, changes the microbiome and other things that will make it easier for you to lose weight after the fast is over. It makes the body turn on some protective mechanisms that also last after the fast. Yes, you have these metabolic benefits, but you also have benefits that have to do with the slowing of aging, such as autophagy. If you constantly eat, then you might uphold too many microbes in the small intestine. So I think we have to talk about.
Hey there, welcome to the Happy Habit Podcast. If you're new around here, I'm Matthew. You'll find me here Mondays and Thursdays talking to experts in the fields of health, well-being and self-improvement. And if that is your thing, you're in the right place. And if you're already familiar with the podcast, with some of the over 400 episodes I've recorded to date, and would like to show your support, well then, be nice. You can like, subscribe. You can share with other people who might get value and some information from these podcast episodes too. You can also leave us a positive rating on iTunes and on Spotify. Many of you have already done so. Thank you. And if you're on YouTube, you can check us out over there, as many new people have done to date. Yes, our subscriber count is rocketing, as are the streams and downloads. You can join in the conversation over on YouTube as well, as many have done so far, and click that bell notification for any future videos, which, as I said, come Mondays and Thursdays. Now, fasting, as we know, is doing without food for a period of time. When we fast, we stress the body, and the body responds to this fasting by adapting so that it is prepared for the next time there is a shortage of food. This is exactly how our ancestors lived, given they could go many hours or even days without eating. And scientists like Valter Longo, who I've spoken to on this podcast before, believe that we can tap into the body's ability to adapt to stresses like a lack of food and reap many biological benefits like weight loss, enhanced metabolic function, and even helping us to live a longer life. To explore this subject today further, I speak with nutritional physiologist Inge Lindseth about how Valter Longo and others have developed a fasting mimicking diet, which involves cyclical fasting without a complete abstinence of food, yet still allowing for the benefits of fasting to occur. What foods can we eat on this fasting mimicking diet, and how often plus how long does this fasting last? We ask, what role does our gut bacteria play in respect of our weight, our metabolic health, and how is its diversity affected by our diet? We also ask whether we should consume probiotics, and if so, in what form, be it supplements or simply food. Fasting is a form of bodily stress that, if used correctly, scientists believe can reap many benefits. However, it is very prudent at this stage to say that adoption of any dietary regime that involves fasting absolutely must be done under the supervision of a professional. Let's talk about fasting. Why should we consider fasting? What are the health benefits of depriving ourselves of food which we need to sustain ourselves?
Well, we have to go back a very long in time. So take yeast cells, for instance. If you deprive them of food, you don't give them that much food, they will live much longer. So, and there are certain genes that we know of that are responsible for this, that are switched on. And it makes sense if you are a unicellular organism that you will have to live long enough to be around when there is food to be eaten again. So then the cells such as that, they will invest in just staying alive. And then when food comes around, then they can, multiply and pass the genes on to the generations to come. Now, these same genes, we have similar genes we as humans, which are also switched on when we do fasting. So that could be one of the links between how fasting affects our bodies. Now, there's been a lot of evolution going on since then, since we were unicellular organisms, but that could be one way of looking at it and understanding why does depriving ourselves of something lead to beneficial effects.
And of course, we're talking about an historical scarcity of nutrition and resources. So ultimately, you're talking about a survival effect that has been acquired as a result of that scarcity. And today, however, we have the very opposite of that. We have an abundance of all sorts of foods and resources, and we are seeing the negative implications of that abundance. I will talk about that a little later in the episode, but if I can just reference Dr. Valter Longo, he's a famous longevity expert who I had on the podcast, I think it was last year, who talks about this subject. He referenced the yeast and the studies that you were talking about there, and he promotes the fasting mimicking or fasting imitating diet, which I know you also promote. Could you talk to us about the basis of this diet, because it builds upon that survivalist strategy you mentioned a moment ago?
Yeah, so what I often find is that when people talk about fasting, it's not really defined what is fasting, because when we speak about it like over the dinner table, it would tend, okay, fasting, you're not eating, so that's fasting. But what I'm interested in is fasting effects. And if you think about it, if you eat, just one blueberry, for instance, you would, well, that doesn't probably predict your fast. But how about 10? Or how about 100 blueberries? I mean, at what point do you end up not having fasting effects? And what Walter Longo has done is to conceive kind of a type of fasting that is not just eating just a little bit more than nothing, but actually quite a lot more, about 1/3 of what you usually eat. And the studies he's done has shown that, well, you do get some fasting effects when you do it in that way. And also, there's just been one comparison study where you compare water fasting to fasting mimicking diet and in IBD, or inflammatory bowel disease. And it turned out that actually the fasting mimicking diet performed better than water fast. So you could say that, oh, you're not doing a proper fast because you're eating something. But I think that we have to look at this completely anew and be open to the idea that you don't have to eat less than what is necessary to achieve as the good effects, and that might be actually much higher than what we would think.
Well, indeed, in your book, The 5-Day Reset, you state that even with this fasting imitating diet, you can eat up to 4 times a day, which seems counterintuitive because we're mentioning the word fasting, but as you say, we can still eat often throughout the day on this fasting mimicking or imitating diet.
That's true. It's 4 meals a day. You can also eat a bit fewer, but the meals that we're talking about here, they're low in protein. They're pretty low in energy. There's lots of volume, but there still is, they're full meals. And when you sit down and when you're eating one of those meals that has the greatest volume, you would think, I mean, is this fasting? Can it be true? Because it's quite a large volume of food that you're actually eating. It could also be that, if when you eat during a fast, you also get vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals that might help you through the fasting. So you can also maybe fast for longer because you do get some support during your fast. And also fasting, for more than just 24 hours or 48 hours, that could be something that could be very important. And recent studies, actually partly from Norway this year, has shown that important things that happen during a fast, they don't tend to start before about 3 days have passed. Yes, you get some benefits from shorter fasts, but when in terms of doing something with disease, using as a cure for something, it seems that there are some additional benefits, at least, if you go on for more than just 2-3 days. And that's when you see large changes in how the body operates, not just on the level of which fuel sources you use, because we've known that for a long time, you can start producing ketogenic or ketone bodies. Blood sugar will go down slightly, and you have to do more autophagy to get some more proteins that you can build new proteins with, or amino acids. But when you see the changes in how the body operates on more of what kind of genes there are expressed, then you'll see changes that start really happening after three days. And then people might have a hard time fasting for a week or 10 days or even longer. So I think that 5 days is a good, something that can be achievable by a lot of people, especially when you eat something during the fast.
Let's dig into some of those benefits of this fasting mimicking diet or fasting imitating diet that we've been talking about. Weight loss, what kind of observations can we see as far as weight loss is concerned? Because people are always talking about that stubborn belly fat, etc. But is this the kind of a diet that they can ascribe to in order to be able to address weight issues?
There are certainly things pointing to that. Now, I would not say that the weight that you lose during those 5 days of fasting, that's the important thing. You'll lose some water and you'll gain usually some kilos after, or at least some weight after you're done with the fast. So the way I look at it is that the fasting period can do something about how your body operates as a whole. Maybe changes the microbiome and other things that will make it easier for you to lose weight after the fast is over. And if you do multiple fasts, then you can constantly push your body in the right direction.
When you say multiple fasts, are we talking this is a cyclical thing? So every few weeks you might do a couple of days fast and then revert back to your normal diet?
Exactly. Starting out, in order to maybe, if you haven't, if you've never fasted for several days, you could fast once every month. You have 25 days pause in between. And then when you've done that 3 times, you can reassess and what is this doing to you? Now, if you just fast one time and then you wait maybe half a year or a year, there might be that much, or might be a lot to kind of fix in your body. So one time fasting might not be enough. Now, once you've done fasting for every month for 3 months or maybe longer, and you see some effects, then you can maybe take a break, and then maybe you won't have to do it that often. So maybe, if you feel pretty healthy, then maybe twice or 3 or 4 times a year is more than enough.
And then let's talk about the actual food and macronutrient breakdown that we're consuming as a part of this fasting mimicking or fasting imitating diet. What foods, as far as carbohydrates, fats, and proteins are concerned, what does that breakdown look like?
So it's about 16 grams of protein on day 2 to 5. There's more food on day 1. It's about 58 or something carbohydrates on day 2 to 5, and the rest is then fats, in a total of about 750 kilocalories. It's vegan. You eat lots of vegetables. There's also, and I also have to add, so what I have done and what I write about in my book is you can do the fasting mimicking diet with Prolon that Valter Longo has crafted. But what we did and what I wrote about in my book is how can you do this if you use regular foods. So I've copied what has been studied in Valter Longo studies and other studies, and instead of using pre-made products, you can follow menus and reach the same macronutrients targets that are the same in Prolon products.
And is it strictly vegan, or does somebody have the option to consume meat or poultry or fish, for example, as their protein source?
I mean, it could work. You add some meat or poultry as well, but then you face a problem because you will so fast reach the protein targets if you add some meat. So it's just going to be so small. I mean, most people wouldn't bother really to just eat just a teaspoon or less of meat. It doesn't really add that much.
And ultimately, I suppose the purpose of this diet, this cyclical diet that we've been talking about, is to shock the body.
Yes, that's one way of putting it. It's about telling the body that now there is a crisis here. There might be more of this crisis. There might be even less food. So the body's kind of overcautious, you might say. So a short fast that you could say that even a 5-day fast is like, oh, there could be more of this. It makes the body turn on some protective mechanisms that also last after the fast. The body is good at interpreting the environment around itself and adapting to it, and tries to be a bit anticipatory of what might be to come.
With consuming up to 4 meals a day, is the body in surplus as far as calories are concerned, or is it in deficit?
Well, it's definitely in deficit. So it's you will miss out on about 2/3 of the calories that you're usually eating. So so that's one major thing about this diet, but also the small amount of proteins appears to be somewhat important, not just the calories.
So it's predominantly fat-based then, with small amounts of protein and very small amounts of carbohydrate.
Yeah, but it's still more than what would really increase your levels of ketone bodies. So it's more than 40 grams, which one could say is a level where most people will definitely get a clear increase in ketone bodies.
Adhering to this kind of diet, we've been talking already about weight loss. Can we talk about the metabolic effects as far as metabolic disease is concerned and inflammation? What kind of effects can we see as a result of ascribing to this diet?
The way these studies have been carried out, the clinical trials, mainly by Longo, they have looked at, well, what happens during the fast, but also they've measured what is the state in the body after, 5 days after fast, and even, 3 months after the last fast. You will see, when it comes to cardiovascular risk markers, fat mass, and inflammation, IGF-1, you will see that will still be lower even 3 months after doing the last round of such a fast. The longest study on multiple fasts, the way, as far as I can see, has been just 6 months. So what happens in the long term? I mean, we have no actual data showing that you will get a lower amount of cardiovascular disease if you do fasting for several years. So we can't really say that for absolute certain. So, but yes, you have these metabolic benefits, but you also have benefits that have to do with aging. That there are things happening that are definitely linked to the slowing of aging, such as autophagy, which might be something that your followers know what is. So, and actually, autophagy, that's one of the main mechanisms for why rapamycin, that drug that extends lifespan by quite a bit in animals, that's one of the main mechanisms for how that works. So, and we know that fasting will work in the same way. And in addition, do a lot of other things.
On your Instagram, I saw a post that said that 1 in 10 Norwegian women and 1 in 30 Norwegian men have metabolic disease. I would think, compared to other Western countries, countries in the Western world, I should say, I would think that these figures are actually quite good. What do you think personally is driving this epidemic of metabolic disease today? Is it how often we're eating? Is it the surplus of foods we're eating? Or is it the content of what we're eating?
Well, I think in 2024, when you speak about nutrition and health, and to not mention how the food is processed, that's a big error. So when I started out as a student, and also the first years of my professional career, I really found it hard to make sense of a lot of things. But that, I would say, all changed when there was much more focus on the microbiome and the processing of foods, and also the circadian rhythm and when you eat. So take, for instance, mice that eat at the wrong time. They get 1 meal a day, and they eat just before they're about to go to sleep. They don't sleep in exactly the same way as we as humans, but the point is kind of the same. And then you will see that they live quite a lot longer when they eat at the right time. About 13% longer they will live. So that's a huge effect just by when you eat during your day. So that's one thing. And I think that, you can see a lot of people who do, seemingly bad things. They eat, junk food maybe, and then you see, but they're doing fine. And I think that when we talk about these things, it's not just one thing. Maybe that person who eats junk food, maybe he says he eats junk food, but maybe by that he means he eats a lot of fat. And maybe that fat isn't all that bad, but maybe he doesn't eat that late. And maybe he was lucky because he had a good microbiome from his mother, and doesn't stress a lot. So I think that we can't really look at or pinpoint, just one or two things, and that's really bad. You have some resiliency in your body. So I think that the perfect storm of processing of foods, how nutrients then are more accessible, and also these additives that are in ultra processed foods, and also that you eat often, that you eat at the wrong times of the day, and then add to that the stresses of a modern day life, and then you have some of the most important things that I think how nutrition affects our health.
I'll pop a link to my microbiome with whom you've worked for the last few years into the show notes for this episode. Could you talk to us then about the good things and the positive things that we can do in order to help our good microbiome, our good gut bacteria flourish?
I think that eating often, it isn't unusual for Americans, for instance, to eat up to 10, 12 times per day. I think that we also have to think much more about the small intestinal microbiome than we're doing. And people are, they're measuring the fecal microbiome, and saying that this is the gut well, it's not the gut microbiome, it's the fecal microbiome. And maybe it says more about the colon microbiome than what might be most important, and that is the small intestinal microbiome. So let's say if you eat very often, and then, usually in the small intestine, there shouldn't be that many microbes. So but when there's food coming in, then there's more to eat for the microbes, and the microbes that you have in the distal part of your small intestine, they could increase and move further up the intestine. But if there's a large pause between your meals, then they will kind of die out, or there will be less of these microbes. But if you constantly eat, then you might uphold too many microbes in the small intestine. So I think we have to talk about meal frequency as well. But then there's also the how accessible are the nutrients? We know that if microbes if the nutrient density around them is large, they will get more virulent. So let's say you drink an apple, or you drink apple juice, or you eat an apple. The microbes in your small intestine, they will be more exposed to fiber, plant cell walls, when you eat an apple. If you drink an apple, they will be swimming in sugar, like it's everywhere. So the sugar from the whole apple, it will eventually, get out of the cells, but it's a totally different dynamic, which might be really important. So if you combine eating often with a high accessibility of nutrients right off the bat, high up in the small intestine, I think that is something that's not good for your overall health and for your microbiome. So those foods also lack phytonutrients, lack substances that can be kind of work as an antibiotic, kind of keep the microbes, not growing that much. Then you're getting closer to a perfect storm for how your gut operates and how food can affect us badly. So I would say eat, 2 to 3 meals a day, very little processed. I mean, it can be processed, but it shouldn't be heavily processed. And not, so that means, not too much white sugar and flour, and not too much, refined oils. Include, a lot of spices and vegetables, fermented foods. Then you and you don't eat that late, then you have a good recipe for a good diet.
What are your thoughts on encouraging diversity within your microbiome by supplementation with probiotics, or should it just be done with food?
I think that there's definitely a place for probiotics. I don't see that if you're healthy from the outset and you have a good diet that you would need probiotics. And there have been done, quite a lot of studies on probiotics, and you see definitely you see some effects. I would also say that the effects aren't daunting. It's doing something. How are these probiotics supposed to work? I mean, there's a lot of these probiotics, they don't colonize the gut. So I see them more as something that is constantly sending, you're taking daily, they're constantly sending messages, communicating with your intestines, telling the intestines that the things are good, and also taking up the place of microbes that aren't that good. It's not a major thing when I see patients in my clinic. It's not something that we spend a lot of time on, that we use that much.
You're writing a book on intermittent living at the moment, and this incorporates the intermittent fasting that we spoke about at the outset. Can you tell us a little bit about this book and about what intermittent living is?
It speaks to what you mentioned earlier about sending some signals to the body that, if you just sit in front of the TV and you don't use your muscles, the body is kind of smart, because it doesn't then spend energy on building muscles that you're not going to use. So and also, if you're not exposed to the cold, if you don't take sauna, then the people or the body is not going to really try to get better at handling those situations. And so what I mean by intermittent living is introducing these kind of challenges, not that much, but some short bursts of these challenges that will challenge the body in different manners, and that will make the body stronger. And then, you can do just fasting, but it seems to be an advantage of doing several things at a time, so you can support different areas kind of the body. So it's fasting, it's heat exposure, cold exposure, and also fasting mimicking substances that you can find. You have some substances in food that kind of tricks the body into thinking that now we're doing fasting. So you can kind of cheat if you don't especially like fasting that much. There are some substances that can increase autophagy, for instance. The book is about trying to find the right balance of things. So let's say you don't really like fasting at all, then you can do more of the fasting mimicking substances, or you can do more of sauna or cold plunges. And if you don't really like certain foods, then you can have some alternatives that will do the same in terms of being fasting mimetics. So I think that a lot of people, they know that different things can be good for you, but to kind of have the overarching view on what are you actually doing and how can you put it all together, those are some of the things that I want to address in the book.
So this is essentially all about embracing discomfort. I think the term is hormesis, is it? For embracing discomfort, such that the body then has to adapt to that new reality. And you've extended it beyond the diet, as you say, to a cold water exposure and to heat exposure through saunas, etc. So you're really harnessing really what we've become adapted to from an evolutionary standpoint.
That is exactly right. Hormesis is a good word.
Well, your existing book, your current book, 5-Day Reset, is already available, and I'll pop a link to that in the show notes for this episode. I'll also pop a link to my microbiome in the show notes too, so people can dig more into the microbiome and the importance of that part of the body to their overall metabolic health. But for the moment, Inge, thank you so much for joining me all the way from Norway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Happy Habit Podcast. If you're enjoying this series, show your support. It's free. You can like, subscribe, share with other people who you think might enjoy them too. Leave the podcast a positive rating on iTunes or on Spotify. And if you're on YouTube, become a subscriber over there. Click that bell notification for any future videos. And you can leave a comment below any of the videos. Until next time, stay happy.